Welcome to the Relationship Toolbox, a show about the skills we need to build healthy relationships with others. On our last two shows, we discussed ways to deal with someone who might come up to you in a social setting, perhaps, and make a very strong comment, an opinionated comment that you very much disagree with. It might be someone saying to you, "Isn't it wonderful how our administration is doing things now?" And you go, I'm not so sure about that. Typically, our responses to something like that would be four different types. One would be to stay silent and not respond at all. In our mind, we're probably saying, just stay quiet, don't say anything, don't make a scene. And it may end up giving the impression that we might agree even with the person making the comment, or at least we don't totally disagree with them. And sometimes we leave a situation like that feeling kind of guilty. Why didn't I speak up? I don't feel that way. Another response is to, of course, challenge the speaker and to begin to say, how can you say that? What about this? What about that? And again, before we know it, we're into a heated disagreement or a debate that leads nowhere and often can be destructive to a relationship. A third response is to change the subject. So someone comes up and says, "Isn't our administration doing a wonderful job?" And you turn around and say, "How's your garden doing this year?" So it's an abrupt change of subject to try to get off of something that might be uncomfortable. And a fourth response is to stay silent for the moment. But when you get the opportunity, you start talking with other people behind the speaker's back about, do you realize what this person's thinking? Can you believe it? So it's sort of a passive way of responding to the situation. So Marsha and I have been trying to present the option of a fifth way of responding to a very opinionated comment that you disagree with. And we, in our last two shows, have indicated that if you have certain skills for working with this, you sometimes can actually engage in a conversation that can be helpful in at least learning where the other person is coming from, why they think the way they do, and even the possibility of learning something new that you didn't know before, either about the person or about the topic. So we talked about how to engage the conversation, how to set guidelines, how to use focused listening, and to do paraphrasing, and also the use of open-ended questions. But today we're going to focus on a few more skills. Yeah. And we're going to be talking about how to be assertive, how to create enforceable expectations in this conversation, and how to respond to insults or verbal attacks. So Marsha, let's start with that, being assertive. What does that look like?
Well, there are some components. I would just like to say first that congratulate yourself for getting to this part of the conversation because it's due to the fact that you were able to implement all of those things that Tom was saying, the paraphrasing, the curiosity, the listening, the agreements that you set up ahead of time. So it's only due to that you're even getting to the place where it's your turn to express yourself. And so it would mean that you are confident that you have a right to express your feelings in a respectful and clear manner. It would mean that you're confident in that position and that you're clear in your messaging. This is about the components of being assertive, and that you're controlled in your delivery. So it's during this phase of the conversation that you're going to get some feedback to know if you're going to be able to talk about your point of view. You've kind of prepared this, and you've been a recipient of the other person's point of view first, and now it's your turn. So that's how you're going to craft yourself. And we're going to go through some examples, and I just want to remind people of the disclaimer that we mentioned before, that we're talking about difficult conversations with highly charged different opinions, but we're not espousing any particular one. This can be applied to any side of a difficult conversation, but we have some examples here.
So why don't we start out with a potential role play here,
Okay.
where you can show us how to use the assertive skills, but also using an approach of emphasizing what we might have in common,
Yes.
rather than focusing on what we have in different things.
That might be a good place to start when you're changing from listening to speaking to find that commonality, because people are still going to be willing to listen. So, go ahead.
So let's, again, we'll come up with this concocted statement. So I come up to you and I say, Marsha, can you believe these protesters on the street? I can't believe it. What they are doing is so unpatriotic.
Okay, so you might agree. But if you don't agree, this is going to be hard.
Going to be a difficult
Going to be a difficult conversation. So you could emphasize the points and the values that you think are in common. For instance, in that situation, you might say, well, it is clear that we all love our country and we have passionate opinions about how we should protect it. So that's a commonality without like poking at it too much more.
How would you actually state that to them?
You could say, yeah, the protests are passionate, and we both agree that we love this country and that we have passionate opinions about this country. And you could say, I totally agree that we both feel like we should be able to express ourselves about our strong feelings. Or I'm glad that we have in common, and we do have some things in common, that we understand that the underlying challenges are really, really huge. And that could be a place of commonality that you could launch from. So you could say, on other points, however, I feel differently. May I share my point of view? And that goes back to the agreements that you may have made, saying, I'll listen to you and I hope that you will listen to me in the same way that I listen to you. May I share my point of view? My experiences, my life experiences, have led me to a different conclusion. I have come to thinking this way from having lived in a different part of the country, or having gotten my information from a different source, having come from a different family of origin, and I have had different traditions and practices and different contact with different kinds of people who have additionally had different experiences that will influence my perspective and color. It's really important to stay away from all of the absolutes of like always or never or everybody or nobody. Because
those are hard, aren't they?
Those are hard. Sometimes we employ that language to strengthen our position, but it's rarely true. And then it just kind of inflames people.
I always love the one, well, everybody knows that.
Yeah.
You go, well, no.
Or nobody believes, or whatever. So it's better to stay away from those absolute words. You could say, in reference to this example that we gave earlier, you're correct in pointing out that this one belief, we have some differences. You believe that it's embarrassing and unpatriotic and disrespectful, and I get that. And I believe that it's protected power in the documents of our government, and that it is also patriotic, that it is a strategy for peaceful dissent, and it is still being patriotic. So I'm acknowledging your perspective and then offering mine. I'm not asking you to change your point of view, but I am asking you to consider my point of view and to hear my point of view. And likewise, I want to hear yours, even if we disagree a little bit about that.
That's a potential learning point, isn't it?
Yeah.
That if people can acknowledge that, okay, maybe I should listen to this. I don't agree with that, but maybe I should listen to it. It's just a little bit of an opening to say, well, maybe as they think about it later on, maybe Marsha had a point.
It's hard, though. It's really hard. And we have talked about like getting caught in the bait and the traps, and even with our own awareness, like getting pulled in. So we understand that
When the
it's
emotions
a
take charge.
Exactly, yeah.
So let's take a look too at the point of, we've talked about setting up agreements, but they're also a way of looking at what are our expectations, which are a little bit more hidden. As you say, we come to a discussion with our own perspective, our own experiences, and that includes expectations we have of someone we're having a conversation with that might be different. So I think there are ways to, before we actually engage in the conversation, we can begin to look at what are our expectations and share that with each other, or at least ask permission. So some of these I'll give examples of here. If you were to say to the person before you get going on some type of discussion on this topic, if I disagree with what you are saying, how would you like me to respond? What would you want me to do? This begins to focus the conversation before it even gets going, gets real emotional, on the process of the discussion itself. And what would I do if this were to occur? It also requires the person who's going to be the potential speaker here to begin to reflect on what they are doing and how they are doing it before they get going. So it sets up an agreement, an expectation of each of you. Another expectation would be, if you disagree with something I say, how will you let me know? And how would you want me to respond to that? So someone might say, well, you could just say, you disagree, or I disagree with that, but we'll take that up after you're done telling your point of view. Or you can come up with any other number of agreements. But the point is, you've already brought up the potential situation, and you are now saying, and here's how we will deal with it. You could say, instead of debating who is right and who is wrong in this situation, could we agree to, when we feel that way, to ask a question like, how did you come to believe that? Which is getting back to that concept of being curious about something. I want to explore how you came, what was in your life experience, your information basis that brought you to that conclusion. Another one would be, if I'm not sure I understand the point, or if you are not sure that, if I'm not sure you understand the point I'm trying to make, would it be okay if I ask you to summarize what you think you're hearing from me? Now this again sets up a process for dealing with a situation that could very likely come up. So the response then could be, I would agree to do that, or some other suggestion, but at least you have a plan for it. How would you let me know if I'm not understanding your point? If you begin to feel that way, what would you do to indicate that to me? And what would you want from me in response to that? Again, you're setting up the process before it actually occurs. What should we do if either one slips and starts to get sarcastic or make accusations? That can be a very nice one to set up ahead of time. And it just could be, would you remember we made this agreement that we wouldn't do this? Whatever it is, but it's done ahead of time so that if that should occur, you have something to fall back on. We can say, can we agree that if either one of us begins to feel uncomfortable in this conversation, that we could just say, I need to stop. Let's pick this up at a later time. So rather than get into a heated thing where the emotions begin to grab hold before you even know it, you're acknowledging that it's getting uncomfortable for you, but you're still honoring that the other person might have some more things to say and share it. You just need to do that at a later time when you are more under control with your own emotions. And finally, it's always a very respectful thing to do to say, if at any time I don't follow these agreements that we're making, these expectations we have of each other, I really want you to tell me that. So, and you could do that just by saying, I thought we agreed to, and then tell me what I'm doing that's violating that agreement.
Folks may feel like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? I have to like have all this meta thoughts and conversations about, it just seems cumbersome and unnecessarily, and it's like an extra layer. But it really, particularly in the situation of having potential conflict, it's so important to protect the process.
And it starts the process before you're actually into the topic of disagreement.
Exactly.
So you're actually beginning to engage with each other in a conversation that might not be
as contentious,
yes,
right? But you're
exactly.
Co-creating, and you would prepare for an interview. You wouldn't just go in cold for an interview.
Hopefully.
Hopefully, or there are situations where you would prepare and it doesn't seem cumbersome. So consider this something that requires and would benefit from a little preparation.
I can think of 4 reasons for doing this.
Okay.
And one is just to create some structure so that you begin to know, okay, this is how we're going to do this. Mm-hmm. To model a way to discuss a topic that can lead to conflict. And that's where we go back to the very first thing we talked about, that it's, rather than going away, avoiding, going into silos of people and not being able to interact with people, we now know that there is a way to do this. To build as much safety and trust between us as possible before we even get into some of these more delicate topics. And to demonstrate that we can respect other people even when we disagree about something and have different views. That could help our society now a great deal if we were able to realize we can disagree and still be friends and still work together.
Speaking of working together, if you have a meeting in an organization, there are often norms that you set up that are standard in a board meeting or a faculty meeting or some kind of an arrangement. And we take that for granted, that there are norms about how we behave and how we interact and how we speak. And so what this is setting up is just norms for an interpersonal conversation.
It's a very good point, Marsha, that when we work with people in business too, that these same questions can be asked of team members before there's any discussion of anything, which is how are we going to do something? And they talk about process. How are we going to share ideas that we might disagree with? How are we going to make sure that we hear everyone's ideas? So if despite all your efforts to set the stage for a constructive conversation over a difficult subject, it doesn't seem to be working, we can have some suggestions here too to fall back on. One is if you are, let's actually do something.
I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
So here it's about how you respond. So I could say, you know what, and this could be any perspective. You are so naive and blind to the facts.
Ooh, that could really get under my skin very quickly.
And that's actually kind of not so bad. It could be so much worse.
So one of the first techniques for dealing with that, of course, again, we emphasize we have to be self-disciplined enough to actually engage these techniques that we're talking about, because if we aren't, even if we use them, they're going to come across in a different way from what we're intending here. But the first way we're suggesting here is to stay calm when you hear that and silent. It's sort of a universal that people are very uncomfortable with silence. So what is the point of going silent? It allows that insult, those 2 words of naive and blind, to sort of resonate and sit there for a while. And that can be advantageous to, is that really what I wanted to say?
Do I want to rethink what I just put out there? Yeah.
Another one is to ask them to repeat that. So, but you have to do that not in a challenging way. What did you say?
Yeah.
That would be a challenge. But could you repeat that, please? So they have to then say it again. You're naive and you're blind to the facts. Now, that, again, you can still use the silence, or you can begin to repeat it yourself. I'm blind, I'm naive, and again, let a little bit of silence go in there so that all the time you're allowing them to reflect a little bit on what they have just done.
Impulsively, perhaps.
Impulsively, yes. Oftentimes, when that occurs, you might get a spontaneous qualification or an apology. No, I shouldn't have said that, I'm sorry. And then they qualify it into something clear as to what they
because we don't always choose our words wisely in the moment because we aren't perfect. So it is an opportunity to kind of recalibrate.
Another is to label the action. So someone says, you're so blind and you're so naive. And you say, ouch, that's offensive.
You just say it.
So you're labeling it and let it sit there again, because maybe they didn't realize that it was quite as offensive as it came across. Maybe they intended it, maybe they didn't. But it gives them a time to reflect on that and recover, and as you say, recalibrate if they need to.
And see the impact.
Well, let's look at the impact. So if I want to emphasize the impact of that insult to me, then I can be a little bit more assertive and say, it's hard to listen to you when you are calling me blind and naive. Now that, again, calls for change your approach because I can't listen to you when I'm reacting to these insults. Another one I think is even more assertive, and we have to be sure that we're in that posture where we feel comfortable being assertive, to question their intent, such as, what is your intention when you say I'm naive and blind? And then silence. Because again, it makes them begin to reflect on, well, what did I mean by that? Or you could say, how did you want me to respond to that? Which gets back into process again. Or, did you say that to offend me? So each one of those questions throws the process back on the speaker to begin to make a change. If not, maybe it'll come on even stronger, which then you would assert yourself even more.
It's a request for accountability in real time, because often we don't think about it until like 24 hours later when we're replaying it. But if we're present enough and we've slowed it down enough so that we can take these, then you're asking for accountability to the agreements we've made in real time, and it can still be productive.
And a final thing that you can do, which is probably the most assertive in a situation like that, is to create a boundary very quickly then. And if you haven't had the opportunity to do the preparation that we talked about, the agreements, the expectations and everything, here's where you could insert something like, could we agree to not insult each other or not be sarcastic and so forth, or to stay respectful of each other? You could make the request at that point and see if that helps them to recover. Or if you don't feel that that's really possible, you can come back with, I'm not going to discuss this any further when we can't be respectful of each other. And that really shuts it down.
You could also say, we're not being productive. Let's come back and pick this up again when we could be productive.
Another way of confronting it. And another one is to, if we can't speak civilly, I will leave. Another one is, I don't discuss issues with people who are insulting me. That is a pretty direct accountability statement to them. And the last one here is, I'm very uncomfortable with that comment. Is there another way you could say that? So again, you're doing with that accountability, I think is a good word. You're asking the other party to sort of reconsider the way that they're coming across, not their point of view, but the way in which they're expressing it.
And in the case of insults and verbal attacks, we've moved away from the content that we're talking about and the different perspectives and lived experience about how we reach that. And it's a character assassination. It's kind of like we're attacking the person and not wrestling with the ideas anymore. And that just such shuts it down.
So let's look at a few more, Marsha.
Tactics, yeah.
Yes,
We
so
have the little time that we have left.
Let me go back to a kind of a statement to you that you
Okay.
can illustrate these. These protesters, they're so unpatriotic. Why don't they send them to Canada? You know, I heard in
Jeez.
Canada, they actually teach their kids how to protest.
Okay, so again, you may agree, but if you don't agree, that could be prickly. And what's happened here as the topic has been changed, we haven't started attacking the person, but we've like drifted off to something else and pulled the focus away from that and agitated something. So you can just call that out and say, I think that we've strayed off topic. Can we get back to what we were talking about? Or I'm confused. What are we talking about now? You could, after they finish, just pick up the conversation right back where it was. And just ignore the distraction. You could just say their name, like Tom. What are you talking about? And it kind of brings it back, and just go back to the agreements that we're going to be sticking to something without interrupting. So if we have accomplish this and we can celebrate the wrapping up of this conversation. Maybe we haven't moved each other the needle on our perspectives, but we've had a civil conversation and we might have learned some things. You should acknowledge that so that you can repeat that and that there's a reward for this person engaging with you.
Wouldn't it be wonderful for them to walk away from the conversation saying, boy, we don't agree on these things, but boy, that person is so easy to talk to. Yeah, I really enjoyed them.
and express an appreciation for thank you for spending time with me and your willingness to continue this conversation, even though it was hard and we were sitting with discomfort. And you could just review the goal and saying, I was curious and interested in understanding more, and I hope that we've been able to do that. Do you feel like you've been heard? I feel like I've been heard. We acknowledge that this is hard work. It, however, is a skill. It can be learned, it can be practiced, and you can become more proficient. I by no means am an expert. I'm still learning, but I feel better about sitting in discomfort with somebody that I want to learn from than I used to be, without getting defensive, without getting argumentative, without sacrificing the relationship.
And we are capable of change.
We can, yeah. So it's not just an intellectual experience, and that's where I think we break down, because we think about it being the choice of words that we use, either delicate, politically correct, euphemisms or persuasive, educated verbiage. It's more than just about the words that you choose. It's about your ability to regulate your emotions. It's a physical thing as well, because you're going to have feelings and you're going to have emotions, and your nervous system is going to engage in this conversation too. And so you need to be prepared to be able to sit in discomfort. Preparation is huge. And it protects the process. It protects the mechanism that we're using. It's like taking care of a tool that you're using by putting it away properly and cleaning it and handling it properly. We're handling the conversation with care. We are preferencing listening over speaking, particularly at first. And we're staying curious and we're honoring others, but also honoring ourselves and our authenticity. So we are still learning, Tom and I are still learning, but we hope that today and over the course of the three-part saga that we have shared with you, that you can employ some of these skills for practicing difficult conversations with your families, in your workplace, in your neighborhoods, and in your communities, regardless of what the topic is. But particularly these days when it can be so hard to reach across to somebody else. We look forward to seeing you again on the Relationship Toolbox.